Welcome to a wild week of Civilization 7 news and updates. The good and the bad. Let's crack straight into it. And we'll begin with this brand new Civ 7 gameplay trailer. Very much a trailer, but with some crucial new hints. The biggest one that slaps you in the face is this new leader. Japan, obviously featuring in Civilization 7. Moreover though, it wasn't just the introduction of Queen Kimiko as a leader, Japan, and the subsequent description that they gave. She is a leader focusing on friendship, that's her strength, diplomacy. They also told us that as you move through into the modern age, which I assume is shown in this gameplay footage now, this part is Meiji Japan. So we have the option as we change civs to move through in a more historically, shall we say, consistent manner. We'll delve into this a little bit more because there's a lot to unpack around the changing civs later in the video. I would just like to add that in this highly curated trailer, the game's looking pretty good. Moving on to point number 2, something that's not so good. Oh no, it's Denuvo. So what is it exactly? Well, in case you can't gather and have been living under a rock somehow, it's a software program, anti-tamper, anti-piracy measure, preventing people from stealing a game. In of itself, sounds like a perfectly reasonable thing in a capitalist society. However, there is some controversy around it, reported by PC Games, for example. Civ 7 introducing the software potentially negatively impacts performance, and this has proved controversial among players across many different game launches. In fact, as I was delving deeper into the Civilizaion Reddit, I couldn't help but pluck out these comments in particular, noting the fact that this kind of DRM protection can punish players who purchase the game legitimately, and humankind wanted to launch with it, but the overwhelming negative response toward it seems to have, well, prevented them from doing so. It's something that personally I don't actually relate to that heavily. I haven't ran into many experiences where software like Denuvo has somehow prevented my game experience with actually any title from somehow not working. But it's important that I cover off the bases here, right? The software has proven in the past most definitely to be intrusive, to hinder performance. On the bright side, however, it stops people from stealing it. Again, kind of fundamental to the whole capitalist thing. The one part that I have ran into just a little bit, not with this software, but I think with others, is that always online element. The fact that you must always be connected to the internet to play the game. Now, in this day and age, is that a problem? Yeah, I do still think that it is. I won't bore you with my personal details, but I did spend many formative years in a place that didn't have the best internet connection. Not great, who would have thought, in New Zealand. And as a result, that always online thing is something that I personally do push back on a little bit. However, overall, how do we summarize this section of the video? It seems that Civilization 7 is intending to launch with the anti-piracy protection software Denuvo, and that will undoubtedly ruffle some feathers among players. We'll have to watch this space to see how Firaxis choose to continue with this. Will they pull back? Will they push forward? Carry on? Keep their game protected? We'll have to wait and see. Let's now move into the big one, changing civilizations more broadly. A lot of the news, coverage, discussion that's taken place between Firaxis, reporters, and others, as well as, of course, the new civ, the new leader, anyway, that was introduced, Queen Kimiko. Of all of the things that they're changing, developing, finding some nuance, shall we say, it seems to be the changing of civilizations, and of course the 3 ages that underpin that. As far as I'm concerned, we've separated these things out in all of our discussions, but in reality, those 2 mechanics are crucially and intrinsically linked. The big sticking point, well, one of a few among players of course, is, hey, this is Civ. When I pick a leader, I want to keep them. Or what about the historical? People tend to say accuracy. I prefer to think about it kind of like authenticity or consistency. How do I keep Civ while changing around? And of course, it's important to note this is not the first 4X turn-based historical strategy game to introduce ages. We had Humankind, most notably a couple of years ago, introduce 6 or 7 different ages where you had to meet certain metrics in order to progress. Then there was Millennia, which had 10 some ages, and they could vary. between deadly crisis ages and the more peaceful, standard, perhaps traditional historical ones. Both of these games change ages a lot. Civilization 7, of course, is only changing actually twice throughout a game. The shift into the modern age, and the one before that from antiquity to exploration. Yes, we've seen the new Japan leader. What does it mean? Well, one of the things that I hinted at in the introduction is that changing civs may not always be as violent as we might think. The devs have talked about now, specifically, how Japan can change into Japan. A different time, a different era, the same fundamental base nation moving through into the modern age as Meiji Japan. And this potential option does obviously open up some more historical consistency for Civ 7. However, I should also acknowledge that the ability to just pick any leader you like and match them with any civilization you like in the beginning of the game is still there. That remains unchanged. So let's put the leader part aside for just a moment, that one decision we make at the beginning of the game, and focus in just a little bit more on these, the ages, the legacies, the transitions. This is the aged concern. I've already given you the introduction, right? Other 4X games have had these. Civilization 7 takes a different approach. A much more conservative one, having us only change twice. However, those two changes could be very jarring, and I have some key thoughts I'd like to add here to the conversation, and build on some I've seen discussed recently in the comments. As I showed you, the age concern, the transition with civs is the big one. For me, there are question marks here. Will it always be a race to change? Humankind suffered from this problem, millennia somewhat as well. The player who moves through first sets the pace, and that can kind of mess with the metagame. Or will it be a bit more strategic? Again, we'll have to wait and see. During my hands-on with Civilization 7, I was unable to move through ages. The second part is that consistency. The word I've mentioned a few times already, you'll be sick of hearing me say it, but it does matter. When civilizations changed in humankind, and their colors, their borders, their map, the way that they looked, everything about them changed, I wasn't able to build a consistent story. For me, it was even, to be honest, less about the history, the tying to perfect order, but rather about actually my own journey. How can I keep the aesthetics consistent? And for me, this will be the big sticking point with Civilization 7. How do cities change? We also heard this week, reinforced from our hands-on experience, that when you capture a city, the aesthetic look of it, the buildings change instantly to the architecture of the conquering empire. Previously, of course, this might have been handled after an age transition. So how will cities stay the same? Will their borders be consistent? Will the symbol be the same? Finally, there's some more potential here. The potential of add-ons and DLC. So in the last section of the video, let's talk about that, as well as multiplayer. Let's talk multiplayer and DLC news and concerns. We'll start with multiplayer. It's a small point, an isolated point, and a largely factual one. Civilization 7 fans have apparently been petitioning against a big change, of course, going with that kind of theme, a callback again to Denuvo, which will probably also see quite a bit of backlash if I had a crystal ball to predict it. In the case of multiplayer, what's the pushback? Well, it's around hot seating. Civilization 7 is currently not planned to release with hot seat multiplayer. Another important element that I'll mention here, I've talked about it before, so I won't dwell on it too long, but depending on the system you're playing on and or the age you're playing in, multiplayer may be capped at a lower number than you might like. I'm thinking a number around 4 or 5 for some consoles later in the game, up to 8 players for the rest of us. Now, that's multiplayer aside in one nice little package. I don't have huge opinions around the hot seating, but I'm sure it will matter to, again, probably a minority within the community. I imagine most of us are single players, but again, a very important, I would add to the people in the back, and vocal minority. We'll have to see how this plays out on the multiplayer front. Finally, DLC. Personally, I feel it's a little bit early to be talking about DLC. The game doesn't release for another 5 to 6 months, and there'll probably be a period of free updates and patches. I remember when Civ 5 came out, they released a leader for free, the Mongols, maybe. And of course, there'll be things that they need to fix. Balance concerns, don't even get me started. But let's focus in on the last final point of this video. Not the multiplayer, but the DLC. Largely, the concerns here tend to be rumor-based, right? It's a lot of speculation. That's why I've put this at the end of the video. There are two primary ones. The first is that Ages will be rolled out as DLC, and the second is that leaders, modes, etc., like Civilization 6 will be rolled out. My opinion is that the Ages, granted I haven't played the later ones, only the first one, but that the Ages are kind of fundamental to how the game works. Like it is still a telling of human history from however many thousand years BC through to the modern age. And you can't really remove one of those. It just doesn't make sense. Like, oh, sorry, you have to pay for the middle 1,000 years of the game. Lunacy. However, alternate ages, I suppose, is something they could explore. My inkling, my feeling, is that it's much more logical, especially in the beginning, first year or two or whatever, actually to roll out civs and leaders. And finally, to round out this video, speaking of civs and leaders, I believe there'll be a little bit of a push toward that more consistent feel. I hope that my aesthetic points carry through, that civs look the same, even if their culture changes as you move through the 3 ages. But again, it's a bit of a wait and see. Thank you so much for joining me today. This has been a roundhouse recap of the Civilization 7 news and updates that have come out this week. I'd like to make this a regular thing, but I don't want to be making news videos when there isn't news, so I'll refrain from making that commitment just now. The devs are scheduled for another big panel at the very end of the month, and in September we're also expecting more new gameplay for Civ 7 to be released. So be sure to stick around, subscribe, all that nonsense. I'll see you next time.